Today, we're talking about matching the film to the job. And by the end of this session, hopefully, we'll have a clear and repeatable way to make that call every time a wrap job lands on your desk. I always like to start with a scenario, and since we focused on a coffee shop last month, it only makes sense we switch over to my other love, which is tacos, right? So here it is. 3 wrap jobs land on your desk, and it's the same question every time. What's the right film? A spot decal, it's pretty basic, right? Partial wrap. Ooh, we're getting up to multiple panels. We've got alignment, a little more complexity to it. And then obviously that complex full wrap. We've got full coverage, we've got contours. The job gets harder, more difficult from left to right, and so does the complexity of the decision. But as we'll find today, as we'll dig in today, that decision is built on some basic principles and built on a framework that we've discussed before. If you caught this surface intelligence and the window graphics sessions, this is going to sound a little familiar. And if it's your first session, welcome. We start with a common problem regardless of what we're doing. And that is that I have a job to do, a graphic I need to stick, and I only want to do it once. That's it. That's the whole goal, right? I want to avoid reprints. I want to avoid rework and comebacks to the job by choosing the right solution intentionally instead of on autopilot. We also need to be thoughtful about the approach because every preventable failure starts with one of these 4 things. It starts with misreading the surface, with mismatching the material for the job, with some sort of process gap or a risk we didn't see coming. Something like we used a low-tack adhesive on a low-surface energy plastic, or we didn't use heat in a roller on a textured wall application. We failed to clean that window, and now there's dirt and debris behind our now failing graphic, right? So we need to intentionally think about what are we sticking to, what are we sticking with, how are we applying it, and what could go wrong. We keep those 4 questions in your head because we're going to come back to them more than once today. And those 4 things, they break down into 7 questions, or we really ask these 7 questions to kind of mitigate those obstacles, those preventable failures, to identify the work that we need to do really before you open a catalog, right? What surface are you sticking to? Is it a window? Is it a wall? Is it a floor? But more so, what are the details of that surface that you're sticking to? How long does it need to last? This will tell you if you need a short-term or a long-term solution, right? What type of film do you need? Sometimes the film can be driven by conformability on a vehicle. Sometimes it can be driven by ease of handling for the store employee putting up that window decal. Permanent or removable adhesive, how that shifts the interaction with the material or with the surface as well. Do I need a laminate? Is this something that needs protection or needs some functionality to it? Is it interior or exterior? We talked last month and the month before about how that may change the tools and the resources that we bring to that job. It may change our prep. It may change our whole approach to it. Are there any special features that we need to consider? Anti-graffiti, it needs a non-slip floor laminate, those things. They're the same 7 questions from those earlier sessions. It's just a different surface today. And here's where we get specific to vehicles. The surface really does change everything. We're not applying to flat walls. We're not applying to windows. It gets a little more complex. Things like the box truck there that has rivet lines. The car has complexity with compound curves of the front fender. You get into even mirrors and antennas and things like that. Even the flat panel on the side of the bus comes with its own challenges, not only for application and removability in less than perfect environments, but layered graphic, quick turn stuff. And again, you don't always have the comfort of a well-lit garage with controlled conditions. There are simple curves on the roof line of a car, complex surfaces, again, mirrors and door handles and those things. Every one of these is a different conformability demand, and geometry drives a lot of the requirements for our film and for our adhesive solution. That's the thesis. That's the thesis of the whole session, that the surface informs the requirements for the solution. Two disclaimers I want to give as we go forward. First, these webinars, my approach on these are generally not heavy on a product pitch. I tend to separate concepts from part numbers. Today, we are going to talk a lot about specific products because, well, they represent specific characteristics. This is intentionally on my part to identify some of the technology differences between the materials from that science standpoint. But, and it's a big but, it's still just academic. This is not a substitute for physically interacting with the materials and confirming a lot of the stuff that we talk about today. And that's the second part. We're not really able to cover a lot of the hands-on technique element. This isn't a hands-on vehicle wrap training webinar, because I think that's an in-person thing, right? That's just not the format. I do highly recommend, however, and we'll talk about this at the end, reach out to your GF rep and request some samples of our different wrap films, the stuff that we're going to talk about today. You can even email, I think it's info@generalformulations.com, and just ask for some poster-sized samples to play with. And again, test and confirm these characteristics for yourself. It goes a long way towards reinforcing the principles, the things that I'm talking about, and it's fun. I do recommend that you do it. And again, some of that is just, you'll hear me talk a lot. There's difference in taking and making that your own confirmed information, like we do as installers. We can read the data sheet, but we need that application to make it real. But back to the surface that we're talking about, is that resurfacing? Sorry. I don't know about you, but there is this nagging question in the back of my head. Why do we always just automatically default reach for cast on these applications? And why do we treat calendared as such a pariah for these? Ooh, big word for the day, right? So let's take a nerdy 30. Quickly cover the concept of calendared versus cast films and what that actually means in practice. The big thing I think about is tension. And a great analogy, I like this, was with Dallas Fowler, Digital EFX, and he just grabs a rubber band and he starts showing this concept, or he'll grab the side of his shirt and do it. It's a really simple analogy. We're comparing three common PVC films. We've got calendared monomeric, calendared polymeric, and cast polymeric. The idea is to show how much built-in tension each film has and what happens when we stretch it. Remember, the film has a counterpart with the adhesive, so this, again, we're kind of breaking this down as just the film component. We've talked about it in previous trainings as well, where we think of calendared vinyl kind of like pizza dough, where it's heated and stretched, and it has that memory, whereas cast is more like pancake batter. It's mixed with a solvent and poured out, and that solvent is evaporated and it kind of stays in the shape that it was poured in, or rather, it's just a different manufacturing process, right? So on the left is that calendared monomeric. This is our economy or promotional. You're here. It's generally those that are 1 to 2 year film. And in the flat state, there are a bunch of arrows on the inside. I kind of tried to represent that there's internal shrink forces or internal tension on this. Again, that material is already pre-stretched during manufacturing. So even when it looks flat on the liner, there's stored energy in there. And as the material ages, you've probably seen this over time on some of those economy products, that it will try and pull back, right? Calendared polymeric, that second one, it's the 3 to 5 year, or even the 5 to 7 year films that you'll see. They have better ingredients. In the flat state, there are fewer arrows. It's less intense. The film is still slightly pre-stretched. Again, that's the calendared manufacturing process, but the internal forces are a little more controlled, and that's done through better chemistry. It's a better film mix, more plasticizers, more additives and components to it that help it resist that degradation or that memory a little bit. And then there's cast polymeric, where the internal stress on that is muted. It's really, really light. Is there there is still some just inherent, and that's kind of across the board. But man, it is so slight and generally overcome by any adhesive that it's paired with. Again, the film's not pre-stretched when it's made, so it has low internal memory and shrink. Well, so what happens when we apply a little bit of stress? On calendared monomeric, we stretch that band even just 10%, which is easy to do on a curved panel or around a corner on a vehicle. The internal arrows get stronger. They more numerous, right? That internal tension jumps up, which is why I have that gauge at the bottom that shows that we're in the critical zone. This is the film that is most likely to shrink. It's going to pull back from edges or show problems over time if it's overstretched. It's why these films are great for bumper stickers, but not bumper wraps, right? It's got all that stress and tension that you're fighting. Calendared polymeric, well, when that's stretched 10%, yes, the arrows grow. Yes, it does gain a little more tension, a little more pullback, but it's not as dramatic as the monomeric solutions. You can see the gauge goes into the orange zone. We've got to be careful about the film, but it's not a critical risk. Everything is going to fail on this. Polymeric films can handle some stretch better than monomeric. But if we do push it too far, if we push it into deep channels, we push it around tight curves, it still builds tension, and without the right adhesive pairing, we talk about the technique so the technology and the technique, and without the right installation method, without the right adhesive pairing, it can shrink or lift. It's a really good mid-grade choice when the application isn't extremely demanding, but it's not generally our high performance solution. And that is where we go to cast polymeric, because with cast, even when we stretch at 10%, it's only adding a little bit of tension to it, right? The gauge stays in that green low stress zone. And this is why cast films are the go-to. This is why they are that default for complex curves, for rivets, for long-term stuff. They build very little internal tension, so they're not as inclined to shrink. We're not fighting it so much. They're inclined to stay put. So the quick takeaway on that is just that monomeric behaves like an already stretched rubber band. It really wants to pull back, especially when you add more stretch and you add more tension to it. Polymeric, it's a little calmer rubber band, right? It's better, but it still needs a little respect on tough shapes and tough stuff. Whereas cast is almost neutral. It doesn't have a lot of stored energy, even when you stretch it a bit. So it's the most stable on those demanding installs. So when we go back and we look, and I took that Takio Drift van, and let's dive into a surface analysis on that tricked out van. There's a ton of different surface types here. The image, it's again a rough breakdown by surface complexity, with green for flat panels, yellow for simple curves, moderate curves are orange, complex curves are red. And this is where cast earns its place. It conforms, it holds edges, it performs across every one of those zones, including the red ones, right? That not a whole lot of other stuff can touch. And if that material technology, if that film technology is paired with good technique and good troubleshooting, it's the easy answer. And honestly, it's the right answer, right? But depending on what the surface is that the graphics need to stick to, there are other right answers. When the objective shifts, we can look at other materials and options to address the variables. We're big into that this is just a big math problem, right? We're just addressing the variables, and we can still lock in a solid solution. So with this, the goal, we're informing ourselves, we're reinforcing that with experience, and then we're making deliberate decisions about what trade-offs we can make. And on the flip side, when we're given a material that's different than what we're used to, we can test its behavior to see how it's going to perform long term. And we can weigh its characteristics against the job so that, like our goal, we only have to do it once. Beyond just the film, you also have the complexities with the adhesive systems on these different vehicle or wrap solutions. And I just want to again put some names to a few of those other options. For calendared films, we look at GF209 Metromark and the Aerograss version as well. These are designed short-term, removable, a little bit conformable. They can actually stretch and conform. We use the same film for our Rough Mark, the textured wall calendared film. So it's designed for a little bit of conformability. And this paired with that removable adhesive, it's a long-term, it's a 5 to 7 year film, but it's designed for short-term transit applications. It's really, as we say there, it's the entry point for transit, for decal, for promotion work that is designed for clean removability. Or 209AE, where we take that same film and we add Aerograss, so it's easier, it's faster, it's more workable and approachable from that standpoint. But again, it's designed for removability with a premium polymeric calendared film. So there's a balance there between film performance and adhesive performance for different applications. You get into the GF230 Automark, and this one, I mean, when we launched this 15 years ago, this was the cast killer. This 2.4 mil premium calendared, super conformable, great adhesive, Aerograss. It just performs. It's long-term durability, does simple curves, does even some moderate and complex curves, and rivets like this again for trailer wraps where it's a mostly flat surface. This is a great solution. And Automark Drift premium calendared. It's a 3 mil film, so a little thicker version with drift adhesive. This was slidable, repositionable, great for partial wraps, flat panel stuff, simple curves, but not really your complex things. So cast isn't always the only option, right? And I wanted to dig in a little bit on what actually changes between the different films, between calendared, cast, permanent, removable, repositionable, slidable, all that. And I'd say some things never change. You still need a hinge, right? You need to get started. You need good squeegee technique. You need to understand when and where to use heat on that application. But what changes is how far the film will push and how forgiving the film and adhesive system is while you get there. How they all work together to get the job done right the first time, right? That's our objective. So these three things I kind of want to pay attention to. It's tack and repositionability. You know, tack is our initial stick onto a surface, how well it grips and grabs that first time. The workability of a material, and the longevity. The right adhesive system can balance out the film performance or even help compensate for lousy technique. Remember hearing Justin Paint was talking a couple of weeks ago, Aerograss liners were one of those great inventions that made installation quicker and easier, but it also brought this crazy challenge with edge failures. Moving from a solid adhesive that, man, I need to be really careful with my technique. Now I can be a little sloppier with my technique, but the adhesive doesn't grip as well on the edges. Technique had to adapt to those material changes, and I think that's still true today. There's so much change and innovation happening. From a tack and repositionability standpoint, where we're looking how well does the adhesive grip and stick right away? How easy is it to reposition and move? From that standpoint, like GF230, that adhesive is aggressive. It's staying power is excellent, and it can combat some of the shrink that a calendared film, even that premium polymeric, might want to give. But that little more initial grip makes it a little less, let's say, forgiving, or decreases the workability just a little bit in comparison to the drift adhesive like we have on 830 cast or that 333 Automark PW, right? Longevity is great. You can push that film farther than you can with other calendared films, but it takes a different approach than a slidable material. And by comparison, that 333, that drift adhesive, it runs lower tack, it runs slidable, it's built for repositioning and long-term removable, but that 3 mil film, it isn't as conformable as the thinner, higher tack 230. It's great for workability. The film, even from a longevity standpoint, is great. It's easy to handle. It removes cleanly, but depending on the complexity of the surface you're working with, might not be the right choice. For the right application, absolutely. Flat, simple curved surfaces, it's fantastic. Um, and then even looking at longevity, like how long is the material expected to last, and what things can I do to extend or shorten that lifespan? Am I matching my material and method with my expectations, right? Metromark films, 209, 209AE, they reposition, they're removable easily, but that removable adhesive and calendared construction, they're not built for long-term complex curve work. They're not designed to build to a permanent bond with the surface. They're designed to be removable for a long period of time. So tension from the application, it can trade off that stay put kind of power for ease of removal. The other wrap films are just, they're designed differently. But the thing is, none of these are better or worse. They're just built for different jobs. So, that term of, am I matching my material and method with my expectations? That's a good one. Good job, Jay. All right, let's look specifically at the example of a rivet line. So those same 4 pillars where we're looking at surface, material, method, and risk. Let's look at that as how it's applied specifically to what changes, right? From the surface, it's a complex geometry that demands a bit more from the film. Rivets are small, complex components that focus stress. If we go back to that analogy of the rubber band, I'm not stretching that tension over the full rubber band. I'm putting that higher amount of tension in one tight little area there. So if my film can't adjust to or address that, that's a problem. And that's where we get to material. I'm thinking about, shrinkage rate, thickness, the adhesive behavior. It directly connects with the shrinkage rate, with the thickness. Can it cope, right? Is the film flexible enough to even get around that rivet in the first place? And is my adhesive strong enough? Does it have the grip strength to stay put, even if the film wants to shrink back, right? We also think about, can the air escape? If I'm doing that, do I need to poke a hole in every single rivet as I'm doing the install, or can I count on the air egress component of the material to push that out? And that ties straight to method. How do I sequence things? Do I pre-stretch the material? Do I pre-shrink the material? How do I manage heat in that, right? I put that thing of knowing when to stop. Am I working with the film, or am I fighting it? I think there's a component there of just relax, right? And we balance that with risk. We're worried about, or we're mindful of, edge lift, failure at the seams, if it shrinks over time, post heating that's inadequate. How do I respond with that complex geometry? And it's a lot of tension to manage, literally, right? If I have a rivet line, my biggest challenge is going to be balancing the material choice with my installation technique. It's a battleground. It's a fixed point in the film that it can't move past. So calendared film with a less robust adhesive has memory pulling it back towards flat over time. And that shows up like we see on the left there with that tinted film over the rivet, versus something that maybe is a thinner film, a more conformable film, a more aggressive adhesive that will tip the scales towards the right-hand side where we've got a successful install. But again, even cast vinyl can fail here if it's not installed with the right balance of heat, pressure, technique, all of that. I put together a little go, no go matrix. I built this to try and provide just some easy guidance on when and where, how far to push some of these things. I think that if you can match the objective with the right option, or the right characteristics, you get a step closer to that intentional system, right? We get closer to a successful install. Notice the pattern here. As you move down in surface complexity from that spot decal down towards the rivet line and deep recess complex stuff, 209 kind of runs out of road fast, right? It's a no-go for complex curves, deep recesses. The removable adhesive just isn't designed to overpower the tension that's natural with those. 333 might hold on a little bit longer. 230 stretches into this go with conditions territory. I'll explain that in a minute. And 830, it's go all the way down, right? It's the matrix version of everything we talked about. And I've got a handout that comes along with this webinar that I will share with everybody as well. And go with conditions. All right, we talked about this, and we're going back to those surface material method and risk. With the surface, I might have to prep more aggressively. I might have to do isopropyl. I might need to use primers to get things to hold down. With the material, maybe it's a different, I'm not going with monomeric, right? I'm going with a premium polymeric tier, or I'm using the 230 adhesive instead of the 333, something that's a little bit more aggressive to match the expectation or the requirement for the geometry and all that. And again, here, don't just grab what's on the shelf, test it. You can test these materials for how well they stretch, how well they hold and relax. That's an easy apply it to the surface, let it sit for 24 hours, throw it out in the sun, see what happens. Hit it with a heat gun after the fact, see if the film relaxes back at all. But again, bond builds over time, so make sure when you're doing that, you're install your test panel, let it sit for 24, 48, 72 hours before you really start to abuse it. That's about the time you'll start to see some of those relaxing or those defects start popping up. All right, back the method. Yep, it may be that you're pre-shrinking or cold stretching. You're managing the tension. You're sequencing the heat that you use, whether you heat before or you heat after. I'm a fan of heat to relax. So much of the application method seems to come down to slow down and pay attention. I hear read the wrinkles, let the film relax, give it time. You apply heat, don't immediately tack it down. Let it cool. Let it get to room temperature for a second, because it's still moving. It's still doing things. And if we try and force it into a place before it's ready, we're just going to keep fighting it through the whole install. And those are things that you only get through practice. But hopefully it's practice under that intentional and thoughtful mindset, right? Risk, knowing the failure mode, things like I'm using a good solution to hit a price point, but I know there's a better option and here's what could go wrong. It's knowing that stuff before it happens, so that you can communicate expectations, or you can adjust your method, or you can prep more aggressively, right? All of these things are not individual. Everything's kind of tied together. So when on that matrix you see go with conditions, it's not something just to ignore. It's not the yellow light you speed through, right? It's just telling you, slow down, pay attention, right? All right, so we get into the 3 jobs from the start of the session, and I want to apply a version of the good, better, best framework to each. We're going to look at it individually, because that good, better, best isn't really about ranking the jobs. It's about finding the right film for the job that you've got. So when we look at a spot decal, good, better, best, I mean, if we understand the surface, it's flat panel, maybe a simple curve, right? So my material it has the widest set of options. Because I don't have any crazy geometry that I'm fighting against, I can use calendared, cast, permanent, removable. What's what's required for the dwell time, for the budget, not by geometry, right? Geometry isn't the constraint here. So any of these wrap solutions are good. Things I do want to avoid, I want to avoid really films that aren't designed for this. I see that a lot where a for lack of a better term, a sticker material is used on this, a water-based adhesive with a lower end calendared vinyl because it's cheap and easy and I can make more profit on that. And then those are the installs where things are lifting, things are failing, materials shrinking or lifting at the edges. It's a direct representation of the quality of your shop. Those are things just that we're trying to do the job right. We're trying to do it right the first time. But still, we do have a requirement to use appropriate materials for the install. Not that we talked about accidental success. Can it work? Sure, but is it worth it? Right. From a method standpoint, simple install, squeegee technique matters and all that, but you don't have a lot of tension or stretch to manage on a flat decal like this. And risk, it's the lowest in the whole lineup here. The decisions become removable versus permanent, and yeah, there's not a lot of complexity here. Flat panels, these are simple, straightforward. They don't ask a lot of the material or the adhesive. We get into the partial wrap with box panels with simple curves. All right, that's a little more edge and seam exposure than a spot decal. I need to be mindful of how, like directionally, how I'm overlapping panels on the bus, starting with the back and moving to the front. There's some conformability that I need from my film. I need ease of handling. So this is where we're 230, Automark 230, 333, or even that 830 cast. Again, 830 is always going to be a go for these. It's a step up to get to that premium calendared, but still relatively simple. We're worried about sequencing, how we're aligning our panels, making sure we're not putting too much tension that would not only stress the install, but maybe misalign our graphics at that point. So it's moderate. We'll say edge lift, seam failure, those are things to watch, but our geometry is not overly complex on something like this. Versus the full wrap. This is complex, right? We've got compound curves, we've got deep recesses, we've got rivets maybe. The film has to carry a lot of the geometry the surface is a little less forgiving on this one. So material, I'm saying Automark cast with drift. I've seen people use 230 for full wraps like this, and it can turn out great. Again, it's from that workability, it may not be as easy to work with as the cast film. Still doable. I'd still put that in a good solution, but 830, this is the easy answer, and this is the right answer. Method, yep, heat management. How are we aligning the graphic across that? You can get into some of those expert things, and this really is where installer experience comes into play. Easy for anyone in the shop, put that spot decal on. Maybe a little bit more skill for a multi-panel install, but this one, we're talking about training. You're not just going to tackle this on day one. Those compound curves, those recesses, those rivets, really cast is the best to conform to all of it. And that's what makes cast the best solution on this one. And it all kind of flows, right? We answer the questions as we consider the objective, and that really narrows down our options and it directs our response. These questions, what surface are you sticking to, what film do you need, all that, it forms the backbone of that process. But if we're intentional in the questions we ask and we stay curious about the impact, well, our experience deepens, jobs are done reliably, and we just get better, right? Things that I'm gonna send with you today or encourage you to take advantage of. A vehicle film selection guide. So the surface map, the go, no go matrix, the calendar, this whole decision path in one PDF. Try and drop it in the chat here. If not, there'll be a link that will come in the follow-up email here. Always encourage you to check out GF website for technical data sheets, for application guides, full spec sheets, ICC profiles. Those are all out there, generalformulations.com/resources. And if you want to get the films in your hand before you spec a job, and again, I highly encourage that, to feel the actual difference between calendared and cast yourself, reach out to your GF rep or drop a line on our contact us page, send a note to info@generalformulations.com, and we would be happy to get that in your hands. 3 things I want to take away from today. Number 1, cast is always acceptable, right? There's a reason that it's the default, is because it's the one that can tackle all of the challenges on that. Calendared can be a completely viable, deliberate trade-off. It's not always a downgrade. When the geometry allows it, calendared, it can save you a bunch of money without giving up the job, right? It's a viable and solid solution when the job allows. Number 2, geometry sets the requirement. Pay attention to the surface. It will decide, it will dictate the conformability requirements, the adhesive requirements that you need before you even think about a part number or a product number. And then lastly, stay open to change. When the matrix says go with conditions, that means something has to change, whether it's your prep, your method, your risk conversation, whatever. The matrix helps you identify some of those decision points before they become problems on the job. And I think with that spirit of stay open to change, approach new materials with that open eye, curiosity, test it, push it. Everything is a little bit different. Yeah, stay open on that. Next session, when we come back next month, we're moving from vehicles to walls and architectural films. Turning surfaces into revenue is the theme, covering things about how to read a wall before you order the film, the real variables, so what's happening with wall graphic failures, matching materials, technique to surfaces from offices, murals, all that, and then building that repeatable process that protects your margin. It's the same framework, it's the same questions, it's just a different surface and different application. You can register for that at generalformulations.com/training. As always, we close, know your surface, know your material, ask the right questions before you reach for the roll. And that is vehicle and fleet graphics. Thanks for joining, and we will see you next time.